So today we start on the chapter 14. Honor your father and your mother. And one of the Ten Commandments. Did you guys hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, no problem.
Okay, good. Because I saw something. I saw something weird on my screen over here. So just want to make sure. So one of the Ten Commandments, the fourth of the Ten Commandments. Let's read a little bit and have a conversation about it.
Okay. Honor your father and mother. Number one. You know the
You need to speak louder, Soraya.
I'm sorry.
You need to get closer to the microphone or something like that.
Okay. You hear me now?
Better, yes.
Okay. Number one. You know the commandments. Do not murder. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not bear false witness. Do not defraud. Honor your father and mother. Number two, honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Shrial Paidi. The commandment, honor your father and mother, is a consequence of the general law of charity and love of neighbor. For one cannot love one's neighbor without loving one's father and mother. But the verb to honor contains one additional duty toward them, namely that of fiat piety. God wanted to show by this that respect, consideration, and submission and condensation should be added to love, which implies the obligation to accomplish toward them, even in a more rigorous way, all that charity commands toward neighbor. This duty naturally extends to people who take the role of father and mother and who have all the more merit in that their dedication is less compulsory. Any violation of this commandment is to be always rigorously punished by God. To honor your father and mother is not only to respect them, it is also to help them when in need. It is to guarantee them repose in old age. It is to surround them with care as they did for us in our childhood. It is especially toward parents destitute of resources that one must show real filial piety. Are those who believe they are making a great effort by giving their parents just enough not to starve, following this commandment, when they themselves do not deprive themselves of anything, by regulating their parents to the smallest rooms in the house, so as not to leave them on the street, while reserving the best, the most comfortable ones for themselves. Such parents should count themselves happy that their children do not do it grudgingly and do not make them pay for the time they have left in this life by being burdened with the fatigues of housework. So, should old and ailing parents be the servants of young and strong children? Did their mother bargain for her milk when they were still in the cradle? Did she count her vigils when they were ill, her steps to get them what they needed? No, it is not only the bare necessities that children owe to their poor parents. It is also, as much as they can, superfluous little treats and attentions and delicate cares, which should be regarded as the rightful interest on what they received, the payment of a sacred debt. Only thus there is filial piety accepted by God. Woe to those who forget what they owed to those who supported them in their childhood frailty, who with material life gave them moral life, who often imposed hardship on themselves in order to ensure their children's well-being. Woe to the ingrate, for they will be punished by ingratitude and neglect. They will be struck in their dearest affection, sometimes starting in their current life, but certainly in another existence, where they will endure what they have made others endure. It is true that certain parents disregard their duties and do not behave toward their children the way they should. But it is up to God and not to their children to punish them. It is not up to the latter to blame them, but perhaps they themselves deserved it to be so. If charity makes a law of rendering good for evil, of being indulgent to imperfections of others, of not violating one's neighbor, of forgetting and forgiving wrongs, of loving even one's enemies, how much greater this obligation should be toward one's parents. Children should therefore take as a rule of conduct toward them all the precepts of Jesus concerning neighbor, and be convinced that any blameworthy process vis-a-vis strangers is even more so vis-a-vis those nearest to them, and that what might be only a fault in the first case can become a crime in the second, because then to a lack of charity, one must add filial ingratitude. 4. God,
Thanks.
okay.
To honor your father and mother. It is the fourth of the Ten Commandments. Yeah, for beginners, to begin, we see, and we kind of spoke of that on last Thursday in our meetings. If there is a need to have so many books of scriptures, or books to teach us moral content, if it is really necessary to return to the first revelation, the first testament, Christ comes and told us clearly that he did not come to derogate the law, but to enforce them. And he make many mentions of reinforcing that law. And of course, he is talking to us about the set of divine laws, the laws that comes from the divinity that are imperfect, therefore immutable, therefore uncontestable. He was not mentioning the disciplinary laws, the man-made laws that just by the fact of being man-made, they are imperfect as we are, and they are perfectible as we are. And on the set of the divine laws, we have the Ten Commandments. That is well accepted. I don't think, or at least never heard of an institution or an individual who would contest the Ten Commandments. It's basically the code of laws, the code of rules from, as much as I understand, most societies, or if not all societies that I have heard of. And on the fourth one, there is honor your father and mother. And then we have to start to think about what does it mean to honor, right? I mean, to honor someone. And I'm seeing here as a verb, right? And if you go to the dictionary and use as a verb, one of the meanings that you might find is to regard with great respect, or to fulfill an obligation, or to keep the part of our deal. I honor my commitment. I honor my agreement to the deal, whatever, right? So we can use all those three words: to regard, to fulfill, in case an obligation, and to keep our part of on a deal, on a shaking of hand. But is that the case of a filial, paternal-maternal relationship? Is there a shaking of hand? In Spiritism, especially to the complementary complementary books of the doctrine tells us that indeed, in general, there is always exception to the rules. But when things is following a normal pathway, there is indeed a shaking of hand. There is indeed an agreement in the spiritual world that in where parents and future offsprings accept somewhat one another. And when I say accept one another, it doesn't mean that out of love. Very times out of necessity. Very often knowing that it would be a complicated relationship, to say the least. But yet, in normal pathways, normal circumstances, in general, we do agree on that future relationship. Okay, and very often those relationships pre-exist the filial maternal-paternal relationship. So there is some kind of a shaking an agreement that therefore you must keep. They have honor, that there is a necessity to fulfill an obligation. And there is, of course, the need to regard with great respect those who provide us, at least, at minimum, an opportunity to reincarnate, an opportunity to come to the school for the very important lessons, an opportunity to come to the hospital to receive the very important, necessary treatment for the spirit. Not for the body, but for the spirit. Of course, we're speaking here of us being the eternal spirit. So, to honor our father and mother is the word is very precise and very well put, because we need to honor as in regarded with respect, as in fulfill an obligation, as in keeping our part of the deal, to honor father and mother. We live in this world of trials and expiations. We live in this world in which still, unfortunately, evil predominates of good. To expect parents to be perfect parents would be silly, to say the least. To expect that all parents would fulfill their part of the deal, would regard with great respect the offsprings, because it's a two-way relationship here, would be expecting too much of us, otherwise would not be reincarnated in this world anymore. And Kardec puts over here that we have to be very careful that even though some of us may have parents that we think did not fulfill their part of the agreement, that we think did not behave towards us in the perfect model the society expects of parents to behave towards the children, it precludes us from acting the same way. One cannot give what one does not have. One cannot teach what one does not know. If in the pathway of more intellectual progress, this is the best version of us, there is a good chance that some of us reincarnate from parents who actually knows less or have less to offer than their offsprings. And that just increases the need of offsprings to honor their father and mother. Kardec also puts in this passage over here the necessity to recognize that we're talking about biological parents, yes, those who gave us an opportunity to reincarnate, those who provides us a physical existence that is so important for us to be here in this school, in this hospital. Only by that, they already have done a great deal of the agreement with us. Only by that they deserve our honor. But there are also those who accept the responsibility of replacing the biological parents when the biological parents are not able to, due to 1,000 possibilities, right? And those should be treated exactly the same ways as we are speaking over here of biological parents. So honor your father and mother extends to the grandma who had to assume that responsibility, to the uncle, to the cousin, to the stranger, even of perhaps of another country or another part of the world, who takes that responsibility upon themselves to be parents, not biological, of course. And those deserve exactly the same kind of honor and respect. The title here in this edition that is you are reading now, it's filial piety. The one that I use, the one that I actually like better, it's filial devotion. And Kardec goes extensively into this piety, a word that I don't really care for, but it's okay. I prefer devotion. Parents, in general, in the normal pathway of things, sacrifice themselves to the offsprings. They will take the approach that makes it better for the children, even if it's harder for themselves. We are parents, we know that. Could we have done better? Definitely. Could I have done a much better job? Yes, definitely. But again, if I wasn't that good, I would not be reincarnated on this planet. Does it come a time in when parents raise the children, they are now out of the house and age comes in and bring with it the slow down of functions in many different ways, may bring into us as we age limitations that impose the need to receive some kind of help, some kind of assistance. It is true throughout human existence. It's becoming better and better as we advance, as society advances, and we are living longer and perhaps become more and more independent at old age, with having perhaps being better prepared to age. But yet, it will come a time that secondary to age, secondary to a slowdown of many functions, that parents will eventually need some kind of assistance. And at that time, that is the word piety perhaps comes into place, in which the part of the agreement, the part of the obligation, no strong word, but I think it's written obligation of the offsprings, sons and daughters, to, it's not giving back, because I don't believe I can never give back what my parents gave to me. I could never give it back. But I can give what I have now to assist them to be as comfortable as possible beyond surviving. I have spoken before, I believe that as being human beings, being this kingdom, humans, we are above the animalia, we are above the vegetables, and just survive is not enough. Is to live a dignified life. And I think there's the obligation of offsprings, sons and daughters, to provide for the parents when needed what's necessary to have a dignified life. And to go beyond, as Kardec places here so importantly, to guarantee them survival, give food and shelter. Put them on this, on the smallest room, hidden of the house, and put them a little bit of whatever food is there, and save the best for themselves and give the least to their parents. That is, I'd like to believe that by all, every individual with a minimum of moral quality is completely unacceptable. And Kardec places over here that you need to go beyond of providing the minimum and provide the maximum that we can. The same way that in general, they give it to us. In general, they provide it to us. Because in my work right now, I'm much older than the most of my colleagues. They keep asking if I have children. I say, I don't have children anymore. My kids are like you guys. I have friends now. We live in a state of friendship. I used to have kids, they grown up, now we are friends. We sit down together and have a good time together. But I believe there is always a degree of separation. That there is a degree of respectability that is different from other friends. My kids are my friends, definitely. But I'm just not my friends like my friends at work, my friends right here that I'm talking to. There is a difference, differentiated. Is that imposed by blood ties? Perhaps, but I think it goes beyond the blood tie. And I think comes a time in life in which if I need, or if any one of us as parents need, that our kids will provide to us more than you would provide to just a friend. That they will go, I think that what society should expect, that it will go one step above, because there is this differentiation of the friendship. And I use the word friend here as a as direct connection to love. The love between two individuals of friendship. And then this friendship could be familial, paternal, maternal, which is greater than friends at school, friends at work, or anything like that. And I'm talking true friends, not just colleagues here. Again, a direct relationship with love, true love. And it is extremely important that we understand that Emmanuel put that in the book, The Consoler, when he answers exactly this, him, Kardec. Emmanuel was asked to break down this commandment, honor your father and mother, and Emmanuel breaks it down in our chronological development in here, at least here on planet, that we go from living, learning to love ourselves, to like ourselves, to try to survive. That perhaps that's what generates all this egocentric behavior that you have, the selfish that you have, this pride that you have, that at one point was necessary for survival. No, first I have to think of myself, and second of myself. That's how I survive. Otherwise, I'm not going to survive in this hardship. And later we start to see the necessity of gathering groups, and then the blood ties, family becomes strong. Survive is easier if I think of my brothers and sisters, and my brothers and sisters thinking of me. So you create that nucleus in blood tie relationships that increases our means of survival, makes it easier to gather food, makes it easier to make protection against the environment. We learned that it was better to gather into families, and the strength of blood ties becomes important. And at that time also we learned to have fights also, right? Then you have fights of families against other families, and those things go extend. And then we learn that if we stop fighting and we start to unite those families together, we can do even better. At one time we're by ourselves, learn to love ourselves and try to survive. Then we gather into small nucleus, blood ties, and we see that, oh, that's better. But then we start fighting against others, and then we learn that if we unite, it becomes even stronger, even better. Our survival increases, and it's better for everyone else. So the blood ties is important in this pathway of progress, in when we learn to go beyond loving ourselves and start to love at least those that are in the same household. At least those who provides us the opportunity of being here. At least those who took care of us when we were 100% dependent, and for a long time. Human babies are 100% dependent, and not just for a couple of weeks, for a long time. No more than other animals out there. And we learn because of this to have some love towards those individuals, at least out of that recognition that they took care of us for so long. And then we learn to extend that love to siblings. When the siblings come to the brothers and sisters, when the brothers and sisters comes along, we learn that it's better if you unite to share what we have in common, and at least to defend ourselves from the others who come to attack us. So that nucleus, the blood tie, becomes extremely important for us to be able to expand, to learn to love beyond ourselves, to go outside of ourselves and learn that blood ties relationship, and then you can spread it outside, learning that we love our neighbors, that we share our goods with our neighbors, and of course their neighbors share their goods with us, that we strengthen ourselves, that we strengthen our means of survival, that life becomes a lot more pleasant when we are sharing and breaking bread than fighting. And this way you go expanding this ramification into the ability to love the humanity as one single family. But it always starts with this nucleus, the blood tie, and that's the great importance of family. And that's why in the Spirit's book, I don't remember the question number anymore, but Kardec asked the spirits, what would happen if humanity eliminates the family by eliminating, the question goes, eliminating the conjugal relationships, the marriage, so to say. And the Spirit's answer will be a degradation of moral qualities on earth. Would be moving backwards if we start to break down families, or if we start to eliminate this blood tie nucleus that is still so important to us. Somebody say, but aren't we the universal family? Are we all brothers and sisters, one the whole humanity? Yes, we are. Are we ready for this right now? Are we ready to really embrace this universal family as the one and only? I argue, and I have commented in the past, that I believe that once we discarnate, once we leave this physical world, go back to the spiritual world, you should see everybody's brothers and sisters, period. No more mom, daddy, grandpa, grandma, brothers, sisters. Are we ready for that? Can we manage that? When I go back to the spiritual world and I meet the one who played the role of my father here, the one who played the role of my mother here, we'll be able to tell them, no, that's over now. That was when you were incarnate in that reincarnation. Now we are only brothers and sisters. To me, that's the goal. That's how it should be. But can we do it now? So what we know intellectually is important, it's good, and it's a goal for us to reach. But is that attainable to what we have in our heart, the intelligence of our heart right now? And that is the necessity of having the blood family, the blood ties right now. As Emmanuel put, is the trampoline, so to say, for us to be able to jump and reach the ability to love the human family as one. And of course, that goes for the language of the time, kind of condemning everyone who does not fulfill this obligation, that does not regard their parents as they should, that they will have to deal with the grave consequences for the disrespect of this very powerful, strong commandment. And of course, in Spiritism, there is a law of action and reaction, that we will have to adjust ourselves with the divine laws. If this is one of the commandments, and it is, honor your father and mother, by dishonoring them, we are going against the natural law, and you're going to have to go to the experiences that realign us with this divine law. And that may be in many, many different ways. So those who say, oh, if you're being like this incarnation, the next incarnation, you're going to have parents going to be really mean to you, or you're going to have kids who's going to be really mean to you. I don't know if that's going to be the case. Alternatives? Yeah, it's one of the possibilities, naturally. But we will have the opportunity given to us to realign ourselves, to undo the mistakes that you have done as needed with the same parents, perhaps with other parents, who knows? I don't know. It's not written in stone here. If I do something to A is going to do the same thing to me. No, that's not the case. Perhaps A is a lot more elevated than I that what I have done does not really bother A, and A just gonna live on and keep on doing their own things. But there will be along the way those who will be able to learn from those experiences. And then we will be placed together in reincarnations where we can all realign ourselves with the divine laws. Comments, questions?
This is always a challenging chapter to discuss, right? Actually, I want to mention that the question you mentioned on the Spirits book is question 775. What would be the effect on society if family ties were relaxed? And the answer from the Spirits, it would lapse into selfishness.
So it would be a backward contract,
Yeah.
completely contrary to the law of progress.
Yeah, and so it's not going to happen, right? Because the law is of progress. The family ties will continue they will change as we evolve, but they will continue to exist for as long as it's needed for our progress, right? Of course, we cannot talk about perfect worlds or more evolved worlds, how the family is comprised there, because we don't really have the capacity to understand. We know how the primitive world works, right? We just have to look at the animals and ourselves at the very beginning, how the family, and you described well how the family evolution happened. But for us to think that the family model will cease to exist in the short medium term, it's against the divine law, right? It's against the law of progress. So it's not really feasible. Now that it's going to change, of course. When you talked about being friends with your kids, your young adults nowadays, right? Your children, it is already an evolvement of the relationship, because for us that for those that were educated some time ago, the education was you listen, you don't argue, you respect, and otherwise you get punished in different forms, right? And we have moved from that. Some people say that we've moved too much to the side of too much freedom and too much lack of respect from children towards their parents. And it's possible, because we normally go from one extreme to the other until we find balance, right? And I believe we're still looking for this balance in the relationship between parents and children. And I think we are learning as we progress. But I also want to bring the problem here. When you have parents that are dangerous to the children, there are the threatened children or the abused children, how do you deal with that in terms of Spiritism, right? And as we learn here, that we have to respect our parents, but we have to work on our own progress and to defend ourselves first and foremost. So if we are in an abusive relationship with our parents, we need to move away to find ways to avoid the worst scenarios, right? So if it is leaving them at a distance, if we, and Kardec never said here that we have to love our parents. He said we have to respect them. We have to be thankful for the opportunity that they gave us to incarnate. But nobody can force anyone to love someone when we are not prepared, when it's not inside of us. So I think it is all important aspects that we need to remember here. So we're not going to attack our parents that are abusive, but we're not going to allow them to be abusive to us, and we are going to try to protect children that are being abused by parents. But it's important to understand the concept of respect, of accepting their limitations, and working in the best way, maybe from a distance, to allow them to continue their own journey and to learn from their own mistakes. Okay, it's a difficult subject sometimes to talk about it, but let me open to someone else to talk.
Anybody else?
I can just share a little bit of my story. When I was growing up, my father was like a Jekyll and Hyde kind of personality, and you could say he was emotionally abusive, mentally abusive, physically abusive. And as a young adult, I didn't. I always looked to the good part of him. It was just a natural part of me. Always thankful that he would bring us out hiking or snowshoeing or skating or things like that, which made me, forget about the other stuff. But then as I got older, I became more and more aware of how much he was hurting, not only myself, but my siblings. So I had opportunity to move away from home at a young age and work for the Forest Service. And so that's what I did. I just moved away and lived on the hiking trails when I was 15. So I could see everything from a distance. And I always loved my parents, and I always could see how they could do the best what they knew, right? But it wasn't easy healing through that, especially when I had my own children. When I was a classroom teacher, it seemed easier to work with children than when I had my own. And that time in my life was what I would call a walking, breathing meditation and prayer every day, so that my biological children would not have to experience some of the things that I did. And I would just pray every night before going to bed and waking up in the morning. But it is a challenging topic. Yeah.
It is to expand the teachings of Christ, the exercise. I'm sorry?
Yeah, you said I found the teachings of Christ?
No, so trying to expand the teachings of Christ in this context that I'm reading right now. The
Yeah.
concept of charity, benevolence, indulgence, and forgiveness.
Forgiveness.
Like Christ told us, forgive your enemies, love your enemies. And going back to Emmanuel, that the blood ties is that trampoline for us to jump on and conquer the ability to love the human. So that is the exercise, perhaps, that reincarnations or destiny, if you prefer, gives us an opportunity to start to exercise, and then a small nucleus, the family ties, that charity, that indulgence, the limitations of our parents, the limitation of our brothers and sisters, our own limitations, the forgiveness towards those who do not fulfill their part of the deal, for those who broke the most sacred of perhaps of the relationships, and doing things that are completely against any and all natural laws. In that small nucleus, you have the opportunity to exercise that charity. Easy for me to say. We all struggles in our relationships, but the necessity is there for us to apply ourselves what we'd like others to apply towards us, right? That benevolence, that indulgence, that forgiveness that I so badly need from others, and therefore I do have the responsibility to give to others as well. Isn't that family blood tie that you have the opportunity to put those things into practice? And again, easy for me to say, easy for me to sit over here and speak the things that I don't know if I'll be able to practice my own words. But Christ came to give us this life manual of how to use our lives, and it starts to apply. And it starts in that blood ties that we can use that, learn that, apply that in that household, and then be able to expand. Because it'll be extremely hard to do that outside, from outside in. It's much easier to do from inside out. And there's a necessity of having families. But yeah, and again, I start my talk and say that we can use here mostly the normal, the usual, the normal pathway of things. But what's the normal? What is the usual? I think each one of us have a story that goes outside of what we would consider normal, would consider be inside of this range of normality. Most of us had experience that goes outside of that. And the necessity of doing the studies as we are doing right now here is to be able to deal with those so-called outside of the normal, I don't know if abnormal, paranormal, but what would be expected of a paternal filial relationship not being inside of that range of normalcy. How can we deal with that? Perhaps through the teachings of Christ, what are we doing over here? We find guidelines that help us to deal with those outside of the normal situation that we all face.
It's interesting. I want to bring the yesterday's lecture about Lincoln. That was a beautiful, very interesting lecture. And Vicente Pessoa mentioned about Lincoln's parents, right? His father was very strict, very difficult to deal with, and wanted to force him to work from a very young age, and didn't want him to spend time studying or reading books, which was his passion. And he owns his upbringing to his mother first, that died very early, and then his stepmother that was very helpful. His father got married again, and she was very helpful on his upbringing, and gave him the opportunities of him to learn, to study, and to progress. And I think it's interesting when you bring someone like him that was able to become who he became despite the difficulties facing with the father and with assistance with the mother and the stepmother. So to remind us that it's always possible, that in the end we are our own individuals, that we have to find our own path, which is the safest. And I think Annette brought a very interesting point when she moved away, when she found it the necessity to move away, and to try to overcome the difficulties. We have a tendency to try to blame our parents for a lot of our own imperfections. And in the end, of course, they are responsible for who we are, but we cannot blame them for everything. We have to look at ourselves, and we have to look at our own path, what choices we made, and what are we doing with our own personal progress, right?
Mhm. I'd like to call that self-evaluation, self-honor and self-respect. For me, that it all came from deep within through prayer and spending a lot of time in the woods.
Thanks. Yeah, our personal journey, each one has to find their own personal way of dealing with everything that is thrown at us, right? And you know, of course, we learn in Spiritism that prayer is always the best path, but how to pray and how to pray efficiently, it's always a challenge, and you know, it's always a learning process, right? I was reading yesterday the book that we're studying on the first Sunday is Liberation. I gave a small presentation yesterday to a Brazilian group, and when I was reading about the prayer that Gubbio gives by the end, and we'll get there eventually in the book, you see how the prayer changes the person, everything around, and that brings, when the prayer comes from the heart and comes from the light that we all have the ability to have within, it gives it changes the whole environment, it changes the whole atmosphere, and it changes everyone around. Again, a sincere prayer. There is a part in the book that they go to the church and to a church, and you see the spirits. They describe the spirits that are in the church, the illuminated spirits and the inferior spirits surrounding all those that are going to go to the church, which is a very interesting chapter that we are also going to study in the future. So, you know, I you know, prayer, it's important that you brought prayer, because it's really very important, but to know how to pray and how to use it to our own benefit, it's a personal journey, a learning process.
For sure.
When we spoke of self-respect, self-love, those are very important things, because the respect that you have to others, the love that you have to others is indeed an extension of our self-respect, our self-love. So it is important that we do respect ourselves, that we do love ourselves, so we can extend that towards, in all directions, to everyone around us. And the self-forgiveness as well. So very important that we forgive ourselves, so we can be able to forgive others, extend that self-forgiveness to others out there.
I would also add self-reflection to that, because with self-reflection, we can go back and see where we've been and how much we've grown through space and time, and recognize who I've grown to become as a result of where I've been, and then have that as an offering to others. For me, that has been an important part of my life, so that I can always remember I'm not the story, and the story's not me. I'm a creation of God.
Anyone else? All right, number 4.
Okay. Number 4, God said, honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Why then does God promise life on earth and not heavenly life as a reward? The explanation is in these words that the Lord will give you. Deleted in the modern formula of the Decalogue, which distorts its meaning. To understand this word, it is necessary to consider the context and the Hebrew ideas when it was said. They did not yet understand future life. Their sight did not extend beyond bodily life. Therefore, they must have been affected by what they could see than by what they did not see at all. This is why God speaks to them a language within their reach, and as with children, gives them in perspective what can satisfy their minds. They were then in the desert. The land which God will give them was a promised land, the goal of their aspiration. They wanted nothing else, and God tells them that they will live there a long time. That is to say, that they will possess for a long time if they observe God's commandments. But later on, when Jesus came, their ideas were not developed. When the moment, stop there, stop there. No,
No, continue.
okay. But later on, when Jesus came, their ideas were more developed. When the moment had come to give them less coarse food for thought, he initiated them into spiritual life by saying, "My kingdom is not of this world. It is there, not on earth, and that you will receive the reward for your good deeds." With these words, the material promised land is transformed into a celestial homeland. Also, when he reminds them to observe the commandment, honor your father and your mother, it is no longer the earth that he promises them, but heaven.
Thanks. Okay, so you said number 2 of the beginning of the chapter. The whole sentence of Jesus is honor your father and mother, so that you live long in the land which the Lord your God shall give you. And Kardec found it important to explain the meaning of this statement, because again, our problem that most of us have is to read all the scriptures in a very literary sense and not being able to expand beyond the words. And when we read the gospel of Christ, the importance of having a better understand of the time, of the culture, of whom Christ was speaking with, which was in general different. And when he spoke with the Pharisees, with the learned of the laws, and when he spoke with the crowds, when he spoke with the disciples, there is always a differentiation to make sure that he addressed each one in accordance to their ability to understand, to digest what he was saying. And in a time in where the more abstract concepts was very hard for us to undertake, the concepts of a spiritual life, of existence beyond the physical, that most of our aspirations was directly connected to things pertaining to the physical. Unfortunately, we didn't move too far from there yet, but at least we understand better. Christ has to use symbols that was pertaining to the things that of this planet, of this existence, of that culture. So the land that God shall give you. Again, someone, crossing the desert for 40 years, trying to free themselves from slavery. The idea of God shall give you a land of freedom, of prosperity, is something that you should be eager to attain, to get eventually. And that was the degree of understanding that we had at that time. And again, it's not them, it's we at that time. Like, we're not calling that they were not smart. No, we were not that smart. We are very limited in our ability to expand our horizons very far beyond the purely physical. And Christ understanding that would use words in accordance to our understanding. But it's clear that later on, when he says, my kingdom is not of this world, he's already given us clues that we shall expand our existence and our desires beyond the purely physical. That to obey the commandments, these and all of them, is what will give us the prosperity, the happiness that we want to have through our eternal life. Perhaps we will have this reincarnation here right now, and let's assume some of us will have to deal with difficult parents who had less to give than other parents, who was less understandable of these concepts that we're speaking right now here than other parents. And we feel that God was not fair to us, perhaps. But perhaps we have an opportunity here to realign ourselves with divine laws, that learn very important lessons right now. And if you do learn the lessons, if you do as Emmanuel suggests, have faith, work, and wait with patience. If you have that ability to wait with patience, then we will get the reward that perhaps never gonna come during this present reincarnation. Maybe we can start bad and end worse, physically speaking. But if you endure that with faith, working and wait with patiently, then we will conquer that land of freedom that God has for all of us. But it's up to us to conquer it, and it's not of this world, because Jesus' word is not of this world. Jesus' word is not a planet of trials and expiations, and therefore the land that God offers to us cannot be this world of trial and expiation. This is not our home. This is the school. This is the hospital. And if you are here because you're just simple students trying to learn, because we are sick in need of treatment. But once we heal ourselves, once we learn the lessons, then there is that beautiful land waiting for us. Comments? Okay. All right, so we can start item 5 then, which is another challenge for us here.
Yes. Who is my mother and who are my brothers? 5. Then he went home, and the crowd gathered again, so that they could not even eat. And when his family heard it, they went out to seize him, for they were saying, he is out of his mind. And his mother and his brothers came, and standing outside, they sent to him and called him. And a crowd was sitting around him, and they said to him, your mother and your brothers are outside, seeking you. And he answered them, who are my mother and my brothers? And looking about at those who sat around him, he said, here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of God, he is my brother and sister and mother. Do number 6.
Yes, please.
Okay. Certain words seem strange coming from Jesus's mouth, in contrast with his kindness and his unalterable benevolence toward all. Unbelievers did not fail to weaponize them by saying that he contradicted himself. An indisputable fact is that his doctrine has as its essential basis as its cornerstone, the law of love and charity. Therefore, he could not destroy on one side what he established on the other, from which it is necessary to draw a rigorous consequence, namely that if certain maxims are in contradiction with the principle, it is that some words attributed to him were either badly rendered, badly understood, or not uttered by him at all.
Okay, thanks. This is another challenge for us to try to this puzzle, us to try to put together. Who is my mother? Who is my brother? That, as Kardec puts here, disbelievers never cease to use this as a weapon, stating that he contradicted himself. It is, as being told, don't recall the books. I'm sorry, I'm not really good at the bringing sources. But we don't know much of Christ's life between 13 and 30, right? There's we have some records of his life up to 13. We have all his life between 30 and 33, very well detailed. But what happened between that? Between 13 and 30. There's a lot of things that have been written over there. There is even some Spiritist book that say some things that off this wall. That, well, not Spiritism, I'm sorry. Spiritist book did not write those things, but there's some books that is supposedly from psychography that say some really crazy things about the life of Christ between 13 and 30. But the truth is that we don't know very much. But we do know one thing, that his mother wanted him to go into the studies of the laws and get into the temples and become one of those people who spend their entire lives inside temples, become very smart and doing nothing for others. Very often, unfortunately, what happens, right? And when his mother was talking to him, he told her, when he completed 13 years old, that had already decided what is the best. And then the next day he went to his father Joseph and asked him to teach him the art of carpentry. And again, it's not really written anywhere, but we know that he became a carpenter. We know that he worked as a carpenter. So the most likely, not saying for sure here, that's what he did. He was in the carpentry, learning from his father the art of dealing with wood. Setting an example to us that the need of family, the need to learn from families, the need to have that honor your father and your mother, honor the tradition of your father and your mother, in accordance with the time, of course. I want to say that sons of doctors must be doctors and daughters of engineers must be engineers. That's not what I'm saying. But Jesus gave the example of the necessity of that family union to honor father and mother right then and there. And actually that in the book Boa Nova. I don't know if it's translated or not. So
Not
only by
officially. There are some translations, unofficial translations circulating, but there's no official translation published. The good news, it's called the book.
So I just want to mention the officials and want to mention, I think, unofficial. So the idea that Jesus would contradict himself is not acceptable by most of us. His words may be hard to understand at a point, and this statement with my mother and my brothers is a very powerful one that it's at first glimpse you would suggest that he's devaluing family ties, and it's not the case. When he says that my kingdom is not of this world, he's making a correlation, making a statement right there in there, that he is now at a point that he extends the family beyond the blood ties and expresses that those who are here, fulfilling the will of my father and my brothers and my mothers. But in any way, Jesus would disrespect that, so much so that he used to visit families, he used to suggest offsprings to be respectful, to honor. In this statement over here, he brings back the commandment to reinforce the laws, that he's promised that he did not come to derogate, but to reinforce the laws. And the laws is to honor father and mother, and therefore they would not in any way suggest that he should dishonor, disrespect the blood ties, what at least for us extremely important yet. Okay, comments?
There is controversy on this aspect of the brothers, right? We know that
Yes.
Joseph was married before and had kids of his own, so Jesus would have half brothers, but there is no real proof that Mary had other children besides Jesus. But again, this is all not. There's nothing official there, and we know that clearly his either brothers or half brothers didn't understand him at all. They thought that he was a kind of a lunatic or something, right? Like many prophets that existed at that time, that were and still as we see today, right? There is a lot of judgment on how these so-called prophets. So his brothers didn't accept him. There are stories of one of his brothers being one of the apostles, but I read this once. I didn't see anything further on that. His mother, on the contrary, fully understood his mission. Mary was a more evolved spirit for sure. Otherwise, you can imagine that a spirit to receive Jesus as a son has to be a more evolved spirit compared to the average around her. So she understood the mission of Jesus completely, but again, she couldn't be at the same level that he were. So she had her limitations also on accepting completely his mission, because in the end, mothers are mothers, right? So seeing him as a teacher wouldn't eliminate of her seeing him as a son, right? That she would like to protect. So if she was seeing him falling into danger because of his journey, she would first probably be inclined to protect him from dangers and before following the teachings. But again, it's all a speculation on our part. But the message here is the universal love, right? In the end, who are my brothers and who are my sisters? As we become a universal family throughout our incarnations and our different family associations throughout our lives, we walk towards the universal family. And I think in the end, that's what Jesus was telling us. and of course, words get distorted, translations get misplaced, and so that's why there's still so much controversy on this passage.
I opt to not mention this controversy of if Jesus had other brothers and sisters, and if you just Google right there and then, and I did it, you'll see the controversy. Some will say that no, some will say, and they give names of 4 brothers that Jesus had after the Mary had sons after the birth of Jesus. Some say 3. It becomes something that is not really significant, but and extremely controversial. So whatever somebody says, oh, he had or he did not have, it's controversial, not really necessary here. But and I thank you for bringing this point that I was going to mention, the difficulty of individuals who comes with a message, with a mission that is so great, so important to have blood ties families. People questions, why did he or she did not get married? Why did he or she did not establish family? The difficulties that it may impose us on those members of the family who have difficulty of understanding that mission, or difficulty with dealing, witnessing all the challenges that a loved one goes through. You know, when when they say over here that the people was gathering around him, that they could not even have a meal, they could not even eat. I mean, the daily struggles that members of the family are gonna have to deal with, those individuals being to fulfill those missions, it makes extremely difficult. So in many situations, we see that we have missionaries out there that does not form a blood family tie. You know, they perhaps already ready to embrace the human family, but it is a hardship. It could be a hardship for many families to deal with the challenges of having a father, a spouse, a mother, anyone, a directly blood relationship, sharing a household, sharing a life with those individuals while they exercise those missions. So perhaps even Mary, as we know, of course, understood Christ, but even Mary had to go through a learning process. And unfortunately, if he had brothers and sisters, they were not able to really learn as much as Mary did learn. But again, the historical aspects, I rather leave that out and just sticks with the moral content of the gospel.
And I think it's important for us to remember here when Jesus in the cross asks John to take care of his mother, and he says, "Here is your mother, and here is your son," to John and Mary, and he took it and took care of her till the end of her life, continuing his own journey as disseminator of Christianity, but taking care of her. And John was the only apostle that was not crucified, that was not killed, that died of old age, right? All the others were one way or another crucified. So again, Jesus gave us an example in the end of who's your mother and who's your brothers and sisters, as he gives the instructions to John to take care of Jesus' mother, of his mother, saying that she is your mother and you are her son.
Okay, we have 8 minutes. I think we can finish this part. can read 7 for us.
Okay. Number 7.
Mhm.
One is astonished with reason to see in these circumstances Jesus showing so much indifference for his close relatives and somehow negating his own mother. As for his brothers, we know that they never had any sympathy for him. Little advanced spirits, they had not understood his mission, his conduct. In their eyes was strange, and his teachings had not touched them in any way, since he had no disciple among them. It would even seem that they shared to some extent the prejudices of his enemies. Moreover, it is certain that they welcomed him more as a stranger than as a brother when he appeared in the family. And John the Evangelist positively said, not even his brothers believed in him. As for his mother, no one could dispute her tenderness for her son, but it must also be admitted that she does not seem to have had a very fair idea of his mission, because we have never seen her follow his teachings, nor bear witness to him, as did John the Baptist. Maternal concern must have been the dominant feeling in her. With regard to Jesus, to suppose him to have negated his mother would be to disregard his character. Such a thought could not animate the one who said, honor your father and your mother. We must therefore seek a different meaning for his words, almost always veiled in allegorical form. Jesus would not overlook any opportunity to teach. We therefore seize the one offered to him by the arrival of his family to establish the difference which exists between bodily kingship and spiritual kingship.
Thanks. So that's more of the same. And I think there are clues, that's what I was going to mention about the historical aspect of Jesus' lives. Some clues here and there that it's more likely that Jesus has had some siblings directly from Mary or from Joseph only. We don't know, but when John makes sense, says things that not even his brothers understood him, well, he'll not say that out of nowhere. It has to come from somewhere, right? There's some kind of brother in that story over there. So it's more likely that his historical life, so to say, he did have brothers and sisters. Brothers, at least, not sisters, I'm sorry. He had brothers, and according to John, not even his brother was able to understand. These brothers was not able to understand him, and as Ron had mentioned, in a time in where a lot of prophets out there, there's a lot of people coming saying that they were the promised messiahs, and there is still, even today, there is still every once in a while around that part of the world pops up one or another who claims to be the promised messiahs. And at that time was very common to have prophets and those who claim to be the messiahs all over the place, and most of them had had horrible ends, if not by their own people, would be by the emperors, the Romans, who would put an end to those things very quickly. And as I said, if Mary also have to go through a learning curve to understand the magnitude of her son's mission. Even her have to go through that learning period that unfortunately most of the people at that time, and perhaps even today, does not understand it so well. But to think that Jesus would present a commandment and just honor it is completely unacceptable. What he tries to do here is to extend the the family from the blood ties to a more spiritual relationship. We got 2 minutes, any comments? And announcements, Ron?
So next Sunday, we will continue the study of the Gospel according to Spiritism, right? So we'll continue on this study when we're going to address bodily kingship and spiritual kingship. This coming Saturday, we have another very interesting lecture on the United States Spiritist Federation for those that like philosophy, the philosophical aspect of Spiritism. We have Umberto Schubert, and looking for the title of his lecture, just a sec, I'll get there. Freedom of Conscience from Umberto Schubert. His speciality is philosophy, the philosophical aspect of Spiritism. So this is Saturday at 11 a.m. on the United States Spiritist Federation web, YouTube, and Facebook page. Okay, and I think that's it for me, Elmo.
Okay. So let us end with our prayer. Let's give thanks to God our Father for yet another great opportunity to receive our Master Jesus Christ in our homes through his teachings, to receive the light of his gospel, to illuminate the pathway that leads to our happiness, to receive his peace that he lives for us, to allow his peace to pacify our sentiments, our emotions, our thoughts, so we can produce pacified, benevolent actions. May we keep within us the fraternal energies throughout the week, that we may internalize at this moment the energies of love and peace that the good spirits are providing to us, and that we may throughout the week externalize all these energies in the exercise of charity to the best of our abilities, benevolence, indulgence, forgiveness, and permission to close this meeting. So be it.